setting. Oops.
Okay, we're live.
Welcome for the Board of Education curriculum meeting. Today is April 18th. We have the Assistant Superintendent, Rob Pennington, and and Erica is here. Erica DePalma and myself, Mary Ellen Flaherty. We welcome you. Today, we're going to go over an update of curriculum revisions across the Norwalk Public School system. Rob, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. And as we embark on this year, we are continually updating curricula, but there were certain components that haven't been updated in a while, and we knew that we needed to create an area of focus in those areas. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about the updates that have happened throughout this year, where we are, what are some of those next steps. I have with me Stacy Bergen, who's the education administrator for curriculum and professional development, and I have Misty Hofer, who's the assistant educational administrator for STEM. And so each of them are going to share a little bit about the different areas in the work that they are leading with our amazing educators, because that is one of the key pieces in our curriculum revision, is that it is involving all of the MPS teachers, and they have opportunities to join and to be part of our curricular writing team. And so I'm going to share my screen, and then I'm going to turn it over to Stacy to kick us off. So give me 1 second here to set this up. Can you see my screen?
It looks good.
Wonderful.
All
right.
Now, there we go.
Stacy, if you'd like to kick us off here.
Yes. Hi, everyone. So happy to be in community with you here this evening. So a lot of the work that we've done over the last year and a half has really focused on redefining what curricular work looks like within the district. And just for a refresher, when we look at curriculum, we're looking at this idea of the funnel. So we start with the largest or broadest span, which is our scope and sequence, followed by our pacing guides, our unit plans, and our lesson plans. You know, at the school level, schools are really looking at the construction of the lesson plans and pacing guides, while the district is working on the scope and sequence and the unit plans. So one of the ways in which we develop curricula is by using a technique called understanding by design, or otherwise known as backwards design. And so we start with the end in mind. So we're looking at the standard and thinking about how can we get students to reach this standard. What would that look like? So we start with the assessment in mind, thinking if we want our kids to be able to do this, you know, if it's solve a complex equation, if it is writing a lab report, we think about how is that aligned to the standards, and then how are we going to get there? So we look at the standard, we talk about our results, and then we think about what our assessment options could be. And hopefully they are varied and more than one throughout the course of a unit of study. Next. Okay, so we've had a lot of work done in curricula. And so in the area of literacies, this year we focused on the 12th grade ELA courses. So we started out by auditing the courses that are offered across the 4 high schools. We're looking at areas where we can condense and offer cohesion across all 4 high schools. We're bringing people together to reconstruct what those courses look like, so that students in the 4 high schools are having a similar experience within the content area. Misty, math and science, math and health?
Sure thing. So in math, we had really strengthened our curriculum over the last 2 years. So we wanted to take that problem-based core curriculum to continue our unit development across our high school courses. So we've really been focusing on 6th and 7th grade accelerated mathematics, as well as high school courses of integrated algebra and geometry, principles of algebra 2, and pre-calculus. And I'll get into more details of all of those later. With health, the state developed a new healthy and balanced living curriculum framework that they published in May 2022. So the focus for this year has been to create standards skills-based health units that satisfy both the state and federal standards and align to our Connecticut mandates for health education.
So one of the other areas in the high school we have looked at is the business departments. And so we knew that in the business department, there were a lot of crossover courses. There were some courses that had kind of low enrollment, and we really had to think about, are these courses that we still need right now in the year 2023? Or are these courses that kind of have phased out and sort of lost their draw to the kids? So what we decided to do was conduct a current audit of all the classes. Where we were able to sort of collapse classes down, we did. In areas where we needed to further develop what this course could look like. We're working on that now. We come together with a group of teachers and department chairs to work on creating these robust learning opportunities for our students so that they can be ready when they either leave us to go on to college or to enter the workforce. In the world of multilingual learners, we did a lot of work last year and this year on rethinking about what options our multilingual learners have with regards to English language acquisition. So we realigned our program in the spring of 2022. Over the summer, we wrote 4 units of study for the transition to English, which is technically usually around 11th grade for most of our students entering, if they enter in as 9th graders as MLLs. And then in this year, in 2022-23, we really have focused on fine-tuning our units in foundations and development. These are typically our 9th and 10th grade courses. In the world of world language, we have done a tremendous amount of work realigning the units of study so that our middle school units are mirroring that of our high school units for grades 6, 7, 8, and 9. We collapsed some courses within the scope of world language. And this year they're piloting those courses and we are revising as necessary.
So I'll go ahead and get into some more details about our mathematics goals for this year. We really wanted to extend our problem-based curriculum across our high school courses. So we had 3 high school courses that were our central focus for this year: integrated algebra and geometry, principles of algebra 2, and pre-calculus. Integrated algebra and geometry was in its 3rd year of being offered. Principles of algebra 2 is in its 1st year, and pre-calculus has been a long-standing course. The completion of these 3 courses will complete the core district courses that are not advanced placement or electives for mathematics. So we're really excited that we're kind of completing this work at the high school, and then we can move into some other spheres and work on strengthening. Rob, can you go to the next slide? Our process for our mathematics work has been through PD and collaboration. We engaged teachers last June and worked with them for 1 week to really take them through the curriculum writing process, like Stacy outlined at the beginning. And then we've continued that work over the school year by bringing not just those teachers who started the work in the summer, but extending the opportunity to other teachers who are teaching the courses as well. We have really utilized our PD days, and it has been very helpful for us in order to get into some really extensive work. And one of the days we were able to actually refine the units that they have been being built in real time. So we were able to work on a current unit that was being crafted and refine it as it went. And a huge accomplishment has been utilizing multiple schools so that we're having cross-district conversations about curriculum. We are right now, our units are completed up to our current time in their school year, and we're on track to complete them by the end of this year. And our next steps are for 23-24, we want to gather feedback on the implementation to really refine and improve how our mathematics courses are for students as they're taking them. And we are
Misty,
yes.
could I just ask you something? We have kind of two cohorts of teachers, some that have started this curriculum work revision, and then some who are coming into it. So I'm just curious in terms of how many math teachers are involved in the first wave and in the second wave.
Rob, can you go back 2 slides? So down here, you'll see the summer and integrated started with 3 core teachers. And then over the course of the school year, now we have 5. And one of those teachers is actually a coach as well. And you can kind of follow that table across. Principles of Algebra 2 started with 4 core teachers. And you'll see at the top, we've got some additional teachers and a department chair.
And so
Mhm.
just pushing that a little bit more. So then on the flip side, how many teachers who teach math are not involved in this as of yet?
So at the now that we're really using our PD days, especially the last one, we had everyone who was teaching a course came and worked on the PD documents. So the problem is you might have one teacher who's teaching integrated and principles, so they have to be involved in one course.
Okay, I see. But then roughly we're looking at all of the math teachers in all 4 high schools, or do some of the, for example, does global studies, do those kids take some math classes in Brian McMahon, so the same teachers?
That's a great question. So global studies, for their core math courses that they create, it's a little bit different, and they don't actually take these courses. However, students from CGS will go over to Brian McMahon for some AP courses or some of the courses that CGS does not offer.
In mathematics.
Mm-hmm. In mathematics.
And so I'm still wondering, do we have all told about 15 math teachers in McMahon and Norwalk High in all the schools?
That are working on the curriculum unit specifically, or the amount of teachers for the schools?
The amount of teachers. So I'm just looking at how many, hopefully the ones that are in the curriculum will be spreading the process they went through with those that are not, but is it like a 1-to-3 ratio, or half of the teachers are working on curriculum and half are not? I'm just trying to get a sense of that.
That I totally understand. So there's roughly between 12 and 14, 15 math teachers at each of the 2 larger high schools. All of the teachers who are currently teaching one of these courses were invited multiple times to come work on curriculum. There are a lot of teachers who did not work on curriculum who teach Algebra 1 or teach like an intensified algebra, because they are not teaching these courses.
I get it. Thank you.
Yep.
And I
go ahead.
was just going to add, I think that like when we offer curriculum writing in the summer, we put it out there, and there are teachers who are interested. There are teachers who are busy as well. And so I think it's important for us to provide opportunities to write curriculum and to provide feedback, but not everyone can do that. And so our next step is to try and get feedback from them throughout implementation of the unit. So even though they weren't a curriculum writer, they are able to provide feedback so that we can make adjustments as needed. I'm teaching this unit. I noticed this. That's a great point. When we planned it, we didn't see that component. We're going to adjust this moving forward. So really, even if they weren't curriculum writers, everyone who teaches one of these courses has the opportunity to provide curriculum feedback.
That makes
Thank you,
a lot
Rob,
of
for
sense.
bringing that up. And I'll give a very specific example. So as we approach our finals, we send out and we ask for feedback on the finals process from last year, the finals that were given last year, anything that needs to be refined or considered for upcoming finals for this year. So teachers are continuously involved in the curriculum process of refinement. They may not just have elected to be part of the curriculum writing for a specific subject.
Clear. Thank you.
Yep. So, and one of our goals for next year as well is we want to make sure that we're continuing to provide professional learning about problem-based instructional practices, routines, and strategies. So we have really tried to make sure that our units are problem-based to support the students in the doing of the mathematics and the learning of the mathematics. And the other thing we want to focus on next year, besides continuing to gather feedback and refining the units that have been written, is alignment of resources. We want to make sure that teachers are able to utilize all of the resources that we're putting into unit plans and continuing to make sure that we're using the most high quality resources possible.
Could you elaborate on some resources that you have? Would that be
Sure.
digital or different books? What are the resources?
So we like to have I like to think of math class as like a balanced mathematics instruction model. So our tier 1 resource for most of our courses is illustrative math. It is a problem-based math
Right.
curriculum. It has high quality tasks. It's very research based. We also utilize IXL for some courses, which is a plugged in resource that has skill sets that go along with illustrative math. And then we are looking to enhance some of our curriculum with more of a financial literacy, but that's something that we need to pull in to match standards and be very careful on how to align those resources into unit plans moving forward.
That financial literacy is of large interest to me across the board. So often we seem to be finding that kids can be really good in math, but not understand how to manage their checkbook or their budget or their personal budget. And I'm glad to hear that there's some looking that way, developing something for that.
So we saw, we were able to see during a learning walk about 3 weeks ago, pre-calc students who were looking at retirement. So if I'm researching and looking at if I enter the workforce here, then I can retire in X many years with this type of a salary. So we are
very pertinent.
we are embedding.
Love it.
All right, Rob, can we move on to health? So we began for health with a goal to create a scope and sequence. So these are our current health goals. We began with a goal for scope and sequence for just grades 6 through 12. And we've decided to increase that goal for this year to include K through 5. But our scope and sequence for K through 5 for the end of this year will be tentative, because our plan is to involve K through 5 teachers over the summer and next year. So even though we'll put together a scope and sequence for May, it will be a tentative scope and sequence. And that we plan to complete that over the next month. What we also had as a goal was to create comprehensive units for grades 6 through Health 2, which includes aligned standards, assessments, a suggested learning plan, and resources. So our process for health, go ahead, Rob. Our process for health began with a Health Curriculum Institute that started last summer. And we offered the participation across all health teachers, grades 6 through high school. We had 6 participants from Norwalk attend, and we interacted with new frameworks. We broke down standards, and we began to work on a scope and sequence, and then as well as performance task assessments. Throughout the course of this year, we have utilized our PD days to continue to update teachers on the unit creation, gather feedback for scope and sequence, which has now been finalized. It took a little bit longer than anticipated because we did so many revisions about the scope and sequence, and we've gotten feedback throughout. And you can see in this picture These are Post-its taken from our last PD session in February. We've also been working with a partner to make sure that we are adhering to Connecticut mandates and frameworks through Lighthouse Wellness and Education Consulting. And we are doing another feedback session on April 24th, which is next Monday, to continue to get some information from teachers.
Misty, would you say that the state mandates are reinforcing things they've had before in a new way, or are there new mandates that will be quite new topics to be taught?
Not really quite new topics. Mandates are really like how much time is spent on. So there's specific mandates that say that you have to spend a certain number of hours on health topics, like narcotics and alcohol. There's a specific number of hours that we need to make sure that we are including in our curriculum.
Okay, but not a directive from the state on how to go about teaching that.
No, not a directive on how to.
I see. I misunderstood the mandate. I was thinking a specific topic was mandated.
No. We do get from the state a healthy curriculum framework, which we are adhering to, but it does not tell us exactly what topics. It's the skills and the standards. So Rob, if you can go to one more. So you'll see in this is a screenshot of our scope and sequence, and skills-based health is really a shift where we are looking at how to support students as they are working on a larger skill, like decision-making. And embedded within decision-making is how to make good decisions. So you might get alcohol and narcotics embedded within that larger skill of how do we make good decisions.
I see.
So right now we are completely finalized with our scope and sequence for grades 6 through 12. We've gotten a lot of teacher input and feedback, and most of our units have been completed for grades 6 and 12 through 12. Everything's been shared with teachers since we started, and they've gotten plenty of times to look at the unit maps. They'll get one more chance on April 24th to really look at it and engage and provide feedback. And then we're anticipating that we're going to be needing to, go ahead, one more, Rob. We are anticipating that we're going to be needing to provide professional development and learning, because even though we've been doing this in tandem with the teachers, it has been a lot of work. And we are using the same unit framework that we have used with all of our Norwalk documents, but our health teachers have not had exposure to that unit plan before this work. So we've been trying to kind of embed that professional learning, but we know that we're going to need to be able to provide support next year as the units are being put into place and being taught. We also want to create comprehensive units for grades K through 5 for next year with a similar process.
So Misty, how different is this going to be for a health teacher? Will they be using some of the same materials, keeping in mind they're doing skill-based? What is the learning curve for the teacher that might not have been in the curriculum development?
So every teacher has been asked and has come at least once. Every health teacher.
I see.
Yep. One of the things that we have really asked our teachers to fully cultivate is the resource alignment to the unit plans. I think that different teachers are at different places, which is the same with any new curriculum. Different teachers are at different places. We have some teachers who have from the very beginning been very invested and really wanted to learn as it was going and try it now, which we said that was fine. You can definitely try this now. You have the access to it. And then we have some teachers who have been a little bit more hesitant. The instructional strategies that we have embedded in the units and are continuing to embed in the units can be supported by coaches in the buildings because they're instructional strategies that just exist. So we're hoping that by making sure that those strategies are familiar, that it won't be as difficult for teachers to get used to this idea of a skill and a standard, and then the assessment, because they've always taught with assessments. They've always taught with standards. We're just asking them to construct it in a different way.
Mhm. So it's familiar, but slightly different.
Yes,
So it's
exactly.
It's not a huge, the content remains the same. What is would you say the stretch is a greater engagement of the students going towards their performance assessment, or what is the advantage to the student learning this way?
So the advantage to the student, that's a great question. And there was a little bit of two questions in one. So I'm going to try to answer them together. So the stretch, I think, will be for teachers, instead of saying, I'm going to start my unit on alcohol, nicotine, and other drugs, it's going to be throughout the course of the year, I'm going to embed alcohol, nicotine, and other drugs into my decision-making unit and into my analyzing influences unit. But I'm also embedding 2 other standards within those units, because now I'm talking to students about how do we analyze influences around us? What constitutes these influences? What is there for us? What are the perspectives that you need? What do you need to know about being healthy? And it's just a little, I think it will give students a better perspective of the fact that there's not just one influence in front of you at any given time. It's not just that you have to make one decision at any given time. It's how to kind of handle all of those and how health is interconnected. When we talk about healthy living, we're not talking about just one thing at one time. We're talking about all of the things around us.
That's a really good answer, Misty. Thank you.
My pleasure.
So before we move on, I wanted to just provide one other piece, is that our goal is that in our May meeting is that we can do a real deep dive into the health component. We just wanted to provide you with an update, but to actually go through the curricula units so that you can see what we have in middle school and see what we have for Health 1 and Health 2. But I wanted to just make sure we provided an update. Are there any other questions around mathematics or our health work that we have done before we transition to more of the humanities side of the house?
I just have one more question. Erica, did you have something?
No, I just said I'm good. Thank you.
One more question of the standards. So was a reference to state and federal standards. I'm just wondering about that federal. Is that just the normal national standards you might have in math or science? Do you have a national standard by health educators?
Yes. So our federal standards are Common Core state standards. That's kind of like what our federal is, and Connecticut has adopted it for math. So if that kind of helps, like math ELA. So for health, there's like health standards, and then there's also Connecticut has frameworks and standards as well. So Connecticut aligns to the federal health standards.
Okay, that's clear.
Yep.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hofer, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, everybody.
Now we're going to transition to our 12th grade electives. And before Stacy begins, one of the pieces is we've done work with English 1, 2, and 3 at the high school. That was a big piece of our work last year. 12th grade ELA electives was an area that used to be English 4 at one point, and it transitioned to electives to provide our seniors with the opportunity to take courses of interest to them. But one of the things that we found is that while they may have the same course name, they weren't exactly identical. And so we really want to create a framework for all of our high schools so that it's a Norwalk 12th grade ELA framework. So with that intro, I'm going to pass it over to Stacy.
Hi. So what we wanted to do was to create cohesive units of study that provide opportunities for students to grow as readers and writers. And one of the things that we know is when students come back and talk to us, and when students and when we have relationships with colleges, they also give us feedback to the, to what our students and what they're seeing about student populations as a whole, right? Where there are areas of improvement, what they see kids as filling gaps. And so we take that information and we started to think, how can we improve our units of study? So one of the things that we did was that we audited all of our 12th grade electives in the English department. And what that meant was we took a deep dive and looked at across the 4 schools, what courses are being taught, okay? What courses have had some high enrollment, which courses have had some low enrollment, which courses haven't been run for a while. And then we started to gather information about those courses. And what we did is we looked at syllabi, we looked at assessments, we looked at sort of content, and we looked at how long the units of study were for each of the courses. We decided that it was important to think about, if we want cohesion, we kind of have to start to break it down and then build it back up again. So we start at the beginning, which is developing a district-wide syllabus that will be used this year in 12th grade ELA classes, okay? So we developed a syllabus so that they can look the same, that teachers were putting the same information in. The information can be slightly different because obviously the cultures at each school is a little bit different, but you want to make sure that necessary information is standard across the district. Each course will have 2 units of study because they're only semester-long courses. So students will engage with 2 sort of big, deep, meaningful pieces of work. And obviously all of these courses will be aligned to the Connecticut state standards. So as we move towards next school year, we're thinking about the implementation of these units as they roll out, and then collecting and revising the units in real time throughout the course of next year. So that's where we are with ELA. Next slide. And here's an example of what the syllabus will look like. Obviously, it's not filled in yet because we're not there yet, but we wanted to make sure that it had all of these essential components because, kids really should know what they're learning at the start of the course. It shouldn't be this big reveal over the course of the course. And it also provides teachers with a framework to sort of think about how this course is moving and where are we going to be in 12 weeks from now. Next slide, please. All right, our business department. So our business department decided they wanted to create a common curriculum that meets the standards stated by the mission and vision of the Norwalk Public Schools, and they are to put forth their units of study by May 30th. They have a very concrete deadline as of May 30th. They have also created a 5-year plan to look at other courses and other work that needs to happen within the business department over the next, well, we're in year 1, so over the next 4 years. So we have audited all of the courses. We have 5 courses right now that are currently being revised and amplified. So we're re-looking at our computer apps course, entrepreneurship, career readiness, discovering careers, and business law, and making sure that the experiences that kids have during these classes are going to prepare them to become future ready. We also made sure that there was a division of work across the committee, right? So we wanted to make sure that all schools had a voice, that there was some choice on what people were working on, that you're writing things that you know really well versus maybe information that you're not that familiar with. And we have a calendar of deadlines that we are really very strictly adhering to. Our next steps, we're going to be rolling out those new units of study, obviously, and then again, collecting and revising the units in real time over the course of next year. So here is a sample of our unit plan. So you'll see all of the units of study are hyperlinked within the course of study. Teachers are looking at essential questions. They have the priority standards and the supporting standards. And what's really nice is these unit plans are mirroring those that we have done in ELA as well. Next slide. So in our multilingual language courses, we wanted to make sure, so that work sort of began last year, and we wanted to make sure that our multilingual learners were given access to grade level appropriate material. And so we needed to take a step back and look at what courses were our MLL students in, how can we ramp up, or amplify their experience so that by the time they leave Norwalk Public Schools, they are college and or career ready. So transition ELA, which is usually the third course for most MLL students, were written last summer, and they were implemented this year based upon feedback. We have made many of those revisions already. And revisions can be something very simple, like we want to reverse the order of a unit because of it fits better, maybe aligns better with history or what's happening in another course. We have made some tweaks about noticing that teachers have had in class regarding skills, some soft skills that kids needed to have experience in. And then we looked at our English foundations and our development courses, and 3 units of study have already been written and implemented, and we're working on the 4th currently right now. So our next steps is we are going to complete that unit 4. We will revise units 1 and 3 from this year, and then as we implement unit 4 for next year, we will revise and implement that unit, and we're going to develop our exemplars.
Stacy, on these courses for MLL students, are those students in other regular classes? They just are coming for the English lessons here? How are they integrated in the regular curriculum?
So it depends according to a student's level on their lost links. So if we have for example, if we have a student, a young person who has come here and they are 14 years of age with no previous high school in their mother country, right? They will enter, if you look at this slide here, into our first course, which is called English Foundations. And so that really is an English language arts class. So we're looking at the foundations of the English language, but at the same time that we're building those, we're also giving them access to developmentally appropriate literature. So, with obviously appropriate scaffolds and differentiation to help them, push their way through the academic responsibilities of a 9th grader in Norwalk Public Schools. It is our hope. Wait, Rob, don't go back. So it is our hope, if you continue to look at the slide here, right? If they have 2 really good, solid years of English language instruction, they should be able to move into transition English B, which is usually grades 11 or 12. Again, it depends on the child's age of entry. And that technically is like a regular, if you will, standard English class.
Simultaneously, are they taking math, for example? That's sort of an international language.
Yep. So kids will be placed in bilingual math because math is math, right? Like 2 + 2 will always be 4, no matter what language you speak. So yes, they're taking bilingual math. They may be taking bilingual social studies. They may be taking bilingual science. It varies from child to child based upon their needs. They're not, there's no uniform program for our MLL students.
That's good. The flexibility is very good.
And
I like to, go ahead, Rob.
I was going to say, and just to provide a recap from last year, we did a lot of work in this regard because the English Foundations course is a 2-credit course. The English Development used to be a 2-credit course, which means that it's a double block. And what we were finding is students didn't have the opportunities to take other courses. And so we've revamped it from, it was also a 5-course sequence. We've made it into a 4-course sequence, and so that we've been able to provide more opportunities for our multilingual learners.
I see what you're saying.
Next slide, Rob. So in addition, last year, we took a big jump into our world languages, and we wanted to reduce the breadth of the units. There were a lot of units, like 10 units for the whole year. And teachers, the feedback we got from teachers was they felt like they were a hamster in a wheel, like just trying to get through the 10 units. And so we made some instructional decisions about what is really important in each levels of the language and how can we go deeper instead of wider. And so they began to reconstruct those units of study to focus on 4 sort of bigger units that are thematically linked. And that what it does is it nicely places our Spanish, middle school Spanish 1, and it parallel with our 9th grade Spanish 1. So if you're taking Spanish in middle school, you're having the same experiences as the high school Spanish 1 class. And that was really important because we want to make sure that when our middle schoolers enter high school, that they are ready for Spanish 2. So we're going to continue revision and accurate alignment. So for example, here's one of the units of study, and you'll see again that it looks just like the units of study for ELA, for math, for science, and for business, and then eventually for social studies. Next slide, Rob. Okay, that was a lot of information.
Yes, Stacy.
What
So,
questions?
so just to repeat you're trying to get everyone on the same page, more or less, so that, for example, if a student were excuse me, a phone call came in, it had to transfer from one school to another, they would be able to have the same kind of course.
Right, the end goals would be the same, right? So we're not saying that, you know, you have to do everything lockstep, like no way. What we're saying is that by the end of this course, like students should be meeting these list of criteria, these goals, so that they can be successful at the course. If teachers want to make instructional choices about, like, they want to use this short story versus that short story, there is choice within the units so that teachers can meet the needs of their diverse populations.
And with some of the courses like Spanish, for example, if I'm a student that's at one school and I'm there for 6th grade or 7th grade or 8th grade and I transfer to another school, we want to make sure that the experiences that they're transferring into would be similar from the other middle schools as well, or the other high schools as well. So I think that that's important, because if it's the same course, it should be like have the same overall arching umbrella, and there are different teachers are going to pull in different resources to support that work, but the overarching umbrella is the same.
That's a good goal.
Because when we think about algebra, just from a math lens, right? Algebra technically is algebra, right? Like if you go in the tri-state area, you know, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, the courses look the same because algebra is algebra, right? There's the sequence of information that kids need to be successful at in order then to move to the next level of math. We want to have that same experience in the other content areas.
Got you.
I have a
Erica.
question if you're done, Mary Ellen.
Go right ahead,
Okay.
Erica.
Thanks. So just to play the devil's advocate, you know, we often hear that Nora Public Schools start the curriculum and we invest in the corresponding materials, and then by the time the teachers learn it, we pivot again. So can you just speak to, you know, why we go through audits and the implications financially to these types of changes that we're making? If there is any curriculum, like material
Sure.
changes that need to be made, training, you know, PD that the teachers need to go back through that, you know, has a financial impact. just to speak to, it just comes off on the outside looking in like a lot of churn.
Right. So, I often wonder, like, every house needs a new roof every sort of 10 to 12 years, right? It's sort of like it's maintenance, it's what has to happen, or we'll have a big hole in our roof, right? The same thing happens in the world of curriculum. There are materials that every district across this country uses that publishers do something called sunsetting, which means they have this series of books, and then the publisher decides, well, we need to update it, we need to change it, and so they sunset it, which means they no longer offer those materials and resources for purchase at the district level. Okay, when that happens, school districts have one or two options. One is you just continue to use what you have until like you don't have any more of it for students to take home or to utilize in class, or you look to purchase other materials that are similar to what you do have to supplement. So at the high school levels, there's been a long time before any sort of new novels were purchased for classes. And so when we had the opportunity this last year, we did purchase some new novels for teachers to utilize in the classrooms. The curriculum itself really doesn't change. It's the resources that do change. Unfortunately, books get lost, they don't get returned, and we have to, as a district, then replace those so that our kids can have materials, so that people aren't saying like, well, kids don't have any materials, right? The flip side of that is at the elementary level, when we're looking at like a reading series, there was a big sort of change in thinking over the last 2 years about what we were doing well as a country and what we really needed some extra support in. For Norwalk, Journeys had sunsetted almost 3 years ago. What had happened though within those 3 years is also the pandemic hit. And so it was my understanding that the district purchased a resource that was sort of like used as a stopgap. The complete resource wasn't bought for K-8. Parts of the resource were bought. And when we decided to make the jump back to a literature series for K-5, we still utilized the school-wide resources. We meshed them together so that we weren't not using what we had, we were supplementing what we had. And then we begin to revise the units of study, which is the focus that teachers have within each of the classrooms. So yes, there is an economic implication that happens every year, across the country with regards to the need to replenish school materials. Sometimes it's a little money, sometimes it's a lot of money. It depends on where we are in the cycle of sort of the publisher.
And but I would also add, even in some of the work that we've done this year, right? The state of Connecticut came out with a new health framework. Well, that gave us this real strong focus area on building out our health curricula and updating it to a point where I think the last time it was updated was 2003. So just to give you a frame of reference around health and PE, those were an area of focus for us because it's been a while.
20 years.
However, Erica asked a great question. We are going to have to invest time in training, but in terms of like all new materials, we're not buying a program. We wrote the curricula as a district, and we worked with our teachers to help build that out using the Connecticut frameworks. We might need some materials to support, but it's not like we're buying a resource for that component. And in looking at business, we might need to purchase some supplemental materials to support the work, but we're not buying textbooks or work that goes into that. It's taking what we have and really making it better. And I think that is a key component. Now, however, as Stacy went and talked about, there are times with certain materials where we do have to make transitions and shifts. But I think that, and yes, when you do make some of these adjustments, you are investing time and effort into building that out to strengthen the work and to strengthen implementation.
And we're trying, you know, in many cases, Erica, we're doing a lot of the training and professional learning in-house. So before we are rolling anything out, the ed admins and our coaches are working on learning the program so that they can then support the teachers. And we never do a, you know, we look at implementation on a 1 to 2 year sort of cycle. So, you know, the first year is like, you know, get all dirty and messy and figure it all out. The second year is the refinement. And then hopefully we can hit the ground running in sort of year 3.
Thank you. I anticipated the headline coming out of this meeting. So I just wanted to give you guys an opportunity just to provide some of that context because it does often come up. And the last thing I'll ask just to address any noise around this topic is, I know you said that you are auditing these programs, and I will anticipate that somebody may say that's kind of grading your own homework when you're auditing the programs. Does the state ever come in and do audits to make sure that while we're following their framework, that it's being done in a manner which represents how they envisioned it being executed?
So historically, it's my understanding that the state does not come in. We have our own sort of in-house checkers. You know, the teachers are great at calling us out and saying like, this isn't a line, or I'm not really sure that this is what we want to work with. So, you know, we have a lot of like, you know, really reflective pedagogues in this district who will reach out and say like, I think we need to take another look at this. And I respect that because that means that people are really looking at the work and taking it seriously and taking a lot of pride in what they're doing each and every day in the classroom.
And just to add, from even with like the health frameworks that the state came out with, they're guidelines. So it's up to us to determine how we want to implement and if we implement and so on and so forth. So we want to make sure that we are following state guidelines. And so that's part of the work that we've been doing to build out the health work, just to talk about that component. And then perfect example, though, is that the state has come out and said, you need to be using a certain reading curricula in elementary school. And we're lucky that we were ahead of that curve because when we made the transition to Wonders a couple of years ago, we would have had to, if we didn't, we would have had to make a transition now. And it is costly to make a transition into a new resource like that. But the state has come out and said, you have these 5-6 options you can look at, and you as a district have to select one. And I know a lot of the states have been, or a lot of the surrounding towns have been putting in appeals saying, well, this is a very costly endeavor that you're making us do, but it's really focused on the science of reading. And so,
and if I'm sorry, Rob, to interrupt. Go ahead.
no.
Just the last point, since the state isn't coming in and auditing execution, and that's really up to us to make sure that the execution follows the state framework. Is there any due diligence that's done to make sure the way that we're executing it, positions our students to, for college entry, based on what the surrounding districts are doing and like districts are doing?
So I will say this, I'm really proud of the work that we have done in Norwalk and will continue to do around quality assurance, if you will, right? We conduct learning walks. Principals and other school administrators are working in partnerships and triads and in PLCs to look at quality instruction as it aligns to the units of study that have been created. They reflect on those. They create professional learning in and around closing some of those gaps. I have to say, in talking to my colleagues at the state a couple of weeks ago, I felt very secure in what we were doing as a city, as opposed to some of our surrounding areas. We seem to be ahead of the game, if you will, in terms of what was happening in our classrooms and the journey that we have taken our teachers and our school administrators on over the last 2 years.
Yep.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that soundbite was on the record.
No, I'm very,
I appreciate it. And I knew the answer to it. I just
Yeah.
said I commend you for all the work that you're doing, because I do believe that we're well positioned, or well positioning our students. But it's important to just make sure people hear, these things out loud.
And I just want to say, it's easy to say, okay, here's our curricula and we're done and we move on. And one of the things I'm really proud of is the constant revision process, because it gives people the opportunity to provide feedback, and it gives us the opportunity to catch things that maybe aren't as right the first time as we want them, and we adjust and we make that adjustment in the moment. And so this idea that, like, we did a lot of work with K-5 literacy and K-5 math last year. That was like our full focus, big project. And this year we went to the drawing board and said, okay, what do we need to adjust, and how can we adjust it, and what other feedback do you have? Looking at our assessments, that's another area that we said, okay, we just taught this unit that focused on X. Is our assessment aligned with the unit that we taught? Do we need to make adjustments? So I think that constant going back to say, how are we making our units as best as we can for our students is really a key piece, because I know that there are
That
times
is a
where
key piece. That is a key piece.
you
to,
get this curricula, or you create this plan, and then the next thing you know, it's 4 years, 5 years down the road, and then you start looking at it and saying, what do we need to do? But that's not something we've done. We've constantly brought this back to the forefront to really look and say, is this everything we want? What do we need to add? What do we need to tweak? Principals provide feedback, APs provide feedback, coaches, improvement teachers, classroom teachers. So we're getting feedback from our stakeholders across the board around what do we need to adjust, or how, what do we like, what's going really well, and what's something we might need to tweak a little bit.
just want to alert, we're at 6:34.
And Roland is letting me know it's time that we have to put closure to our meeting.
Thank you very much for all the work, Stacy, and I guess the other
Misty.
Misty, she had to take off. Thank you for your work and for your explanations. It's time to adjourn. Erica, would you like to make a motion?
Motion to adjourn.